You read that right. After 3 years, I'm updating my patented 5-point system. Stick around to find out how. Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation. Today I'm taking a look at the DC Multiverse KNIGHTFALL NIGHTWING and introducing my new grading system. As a refresher, I would normally give each category either a 0 for bad, half a point for okay, and 1 point for good. Now I'm going to give each category up to 5 points and then average out the total. This is going to give my grading system a lot more nuance. So then, starting with packaging as an example, let's take a look at this box. It's got all the normal DC Multiverse rigmarole. On the side we see it's from Knightfall, but then on the back we get some interesting artwork. At a glance, and the broad strokes are there, but let's take a look at the stripe. The figure has this horizontal line running across, and then looking at the back it's clearly meant to be a separate piece. Then we look at the belt. That isn't anything like this. And then there's the fact that he doesn't have a face. In a situation like this, I might normally just rubber stamp it with 1 whole point or go for half. With my new, more considered approach, however, for packaging, I'm giving Nightwing 4 out of 5. It's close enough to get the gist, but they could have picked a better picture. Moving on to presentation, a Knightfall stands at 7 inches. He's also near complete reuse of Blue Beetle. The only new pieces are the head, the right hand, and the diaper/belt. Overall, I've got some mixed feelings. First, let me just reiterate something I've said time and time again. If it's smart, I don't have a problem with reuse. Here they painted the lines of Nightwing's boots over the boot tops for Blue Beetle. This is unfortunately one of McFarlane Toys' worst habits. It's baffling too because they didn't do that with the Superpowers one. Instead, they adapted the design to work with the boot cut that they had. If they wanted to tweak the design a bit to fit this boot top, I'd have been fine with that. After all, it's not like the comic was consistent either. In preparation for this video, I revisited the entire Knightfall saga. Ironically, Nightwing doesn't appear until the final issue, part 19. He actually has a much bigger presence in the follow-up, Night's End. Because the story ran across multiple titles, there were different creative teams, and let's just be generous and say that the artwork wasn't always consistent. Sometimes Nightwing was depicted as having that horizontal line across the front, sometimes he wasn't. Sometimes he had a ponytail, and sometimes he had a mullet. I know I criticized the artwork on the box for not matching what was in the box, but again, even DC artists couldn't seem to consistently figure out what he looked like. With that being the case, I do want to cut this figure some slack. Granted, only some. Regardless of the differences from artist to artist, it's pretty clear that that stripe is supposed to be 3-dimensional and not just a yellow and black print. Ideally, this should have been sculpted. It's frustrating because on every other McFarlane Nightwing, it is. Unfortunately, also just like about every other McFarlane Nightwing, there's a huge gap because of the rotator cuff. This is consistently the most annoying part of Nightwing figures. In fact, the only time they ever really got it right was the Gotham Family 5-pack, and kind of Chris O'Donnell. There, they just made the whole rotator cuff red. The thing is, if this is supposed to be sculpted, that means that this should be, and also these boots, which is what started the conversation to start with. Again, I do understand that reuse is a necessary part of toy manufacture, but it really makes me wonder if we would have ever even gotten incredible figures like this had they come out this year. Additionally, this is such a niche version of Nightwing that we're probably not going to get another version of it, so this is probably all we're going to ever be left with. To add insult to injury, that paint job is also pretty messy. If I had one other minor nitpick, I do kind of wish that the blues on Nightwing were closer to the ones on Blue Beetle. I think it would have matched the comic better. It also would have better matched Knightfall Batman. On the other hand, Nightwing is his own character doing his own thing, so I don't think he has any obligation to match, but it does really bring into focus just how all over the place this Knightfall collection has been. Especially with regard to scaling, but that's a conversation for playability. Criticisms aside though, there are a couple of things about this figure I really like. I love the fact that they went the extra mile to sculpt a hand with one of his throwing discs, and McFarlane did a really good job of painting it. They also did a great job on the belt. Really goes to show what a sculpted version of this stripe could have been. Most importantly, Personally though, I love this head sculpt. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it's my favorite McFarlane Nightwing. I love the confident little smirk, and not only did they give him the ponytail, they even went in and painted his hairband. Really makes you think about Dick Grayson going into CVS to find hairbands to color coordinate with the rest of his costume. As good as the head sculpt is, the figure is still let down by sloppy paint and too much reuse. Normally I'd give a figure like this half a point, but under my new system for presentation, Nightwing gets 3 out of 5. Moving on to posability, and we've seen this body a few times, but always important to see what it can do. Fur on the top, and Dick has a dumbbell joint. Despite that ponytail, he gets a fair amount up. This far down, pretty decent tilt, and all the way around. Moving down, his arm raises just over 90 degrees. He's got a wibbly wobbly rotator cuff, bicep swivel, double jointed elbows with a nice deep bend, and McFarlane wrist balls that can swivel, and depending on the direction you point them, hinge either up and down or side to side. Shifting to the torso, a Nightwing has a diaphragm joint and a dumbbell waist. He can arch back this far, which is fantastic, but he can only hunch forward this far. He does, however, get a great amount of tilt and twist. Below the bright yellow belt, the Nightwing has McFarlane-style ratchet hips. He can kick 90 degrees and do a perfect split. It's no thigh cut, but he does have a pretty good amount of twist in the hip. And then moving down, he's got double jointed knees, toe articulation, and McFarlane ankles that can swivel, hinge, and like Dick Grayson moving from Robin to Nightwing, pivot. Aside from the hunching forward, the articulation on this figure is fantastic. For posability, Nightwing gets a perfect 5 out of 5. Moving on to playability, and Nightwing actually does come with a few accessories. First of all, and naturally, Dick has a trading card and a figure stand. For more about the Flying Grayson, you can pause here. Again, he came preloaded with this disc holding hand, but he does have a matching alternate fist. Additionally, he has an accessory holding right hand, a left hand with a trigger finger, and an open palm one. Talk to the hand. But playability is more than just accessories, it's also about how well your figure plays with others. Starting with a couple of small-scale Nightfall era Nightwings, and here we have Legends of Batman by Kenner and Superpowers by McFarlane. But for some other noteworthy Nightwings, and here we have DC Essentials, the DC Multiverse Better Than Batman version, Gotham Knights, the Titans, Beast Boy Build-A-Wave, and while not Nightwing himself, here we have Chris O'Donnell from Batman and Robin. As for Nightfall Batman, and here we have DC Essentials, missing a hand and a chunk of one of his ears, the NECA DC vs. Dark Horse Aliens 2-pack version, the Walmart exclusive DC Multiverse Detective Comics 1000 variant, Batman Year 2, and the official DC Multiverse Nightfall. Of course, for another important Nightfall Batman, and here we have Azrael as Batman, also in the DC Multiverse Nightfall subseries, and here we have Robin. Amazing how oversculpted Tim is compared to Dick, but for a couple of other Tim Drakes, and here we have the DC Direct Titans series, and the Mattel DC Multiverse Red Robin. Next up is the DC Multiverse Nightfall Catwoman, but for a couple of other Nightfall Catwomen, and here we have DC Direct and DC Essentials. And lastly, for the biggest big bad of Nightfall, and here we have Bane. You know, there was a time in the 90s when I also had long hair. Oh, yeah? Not my best look. For a relative scale comparison, here's Nightwing with Pizza Spidey and the Spectacular Spider-Man, and as always, here he is with Stealth Iron Man. So, you ever, let that hair down? Yeah? You mean? Mullet bros! For those interested in head swaps, and here's the Nightfall head on the Better Than Batman body. This honestly feels a lot more in line with Dick's personality. Just keep in mind you'd have to do a bit of retouching and do something about the ponytail. The flip side's pretty good, definitely a lot more serious, and of course, no ponytail. Switching over to Gotham Knights, and as far as I'm concerned, any head swap is an improvement. The nice thing about this one is all the colors match. Of course, I'm sure someone out there is curious about Chris O'Donnell. Personally, I dig it. Other way around, not so much. Though for a hardcore customizer, this could be the beginnings of a Batman Forever custom. Lastly, here it is on the Titan's body. It might be a hair too big, and of course the skin tones don't match, but it does have a lot of personality. Other way around, and of course the skin tones don't match, and it might be a bit too small, but if you like what you see, well, there you go. The figure has some nice accessories, but this is one case where scaling really does make a difference. Nightwing should not be as big as Batman. Canonically, Batman is 6'2", Nightwing is 5'10". An argument could rightfully be made that this Batman is simply too small, but this one is the all-new sculpt. As such, Nightwing being too big is the result of reuse. Still, it does scale pretty well with other figures and has pretty good accessories, so for playability, I'm giving Nightwing 4 out of 5. This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price. $20 for a basic figure and some accessories is a good deal, but the figure does suffer from some of those cut corners, so for price, I'm giving Nightwing 4 out of 5 points, averaging to a grand total of 4 out of 5. Have I been too harsh on this Nightwing, or am I right on the money? Sound off in the comments, and while you're down there, let me know what you think of the new grading system. If you like this video, check out one of these. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, play nice and have fun.